I have a storm going on inside of me that never abates. It's constantly roaring and interfering with my sleep. It's a storm because I hate injustice. So maybe I've got this defiant, rebellious gene. Maybe I was born with it. I have these ravenous aspirations, to put the world right, make everybody equal, even though I know that's an impossibility. My father, John, was a very interesting man because coming from St. Kitts, having not been well educated himself, he surrounded himself with books. And he was a real Bible man, but a real political man nevertheless. He was just John Caesar Tweed. He inspired me. He understood who he was. And until the day he died, he opposed social segregation and racial discrimination. It was a very congested neighborhood. Everyone was my mother. Every elder woman was my auntie. And anyone older than that became my grandmother or my granny. That was true of all of us. I mean all of us. Black and white, in fact. There were little white children just across the road there that called my mother, Mother. They didn't say Mrs. Tweed. They said Mother or Aunt Helen, Winifred's mother. I would refer to her as Aunt Winnie. It was a two-way sort of idea. You recognize in a sense, I suspect we didn't realize it then, but in a sense, it was recognizing our humanity.
I met Kingsley Tweed some 50 years ago because of my connection with the Bermuda Recorder newspaper and with the Bermuda Industrial Union. Kingsley was one of the young fellows who we had taken note of for many years, going back to 1952, when he organized a group of workers in a protest movement against employers at the U.S. Naval Base.
They were paying white American carpenters and plumbers and electricians 10 times more money than they were paying black Bermudans. I was determined to stand up and be a damn man. D.C. Kent said, Tweed, you can't go down there. You can't go down there. You'll lose your job. I said, well, I'd rather not have a job. If I have to suffer the indignities of these men, I'd rather not work. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't angry. I just knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly who D.C. Kent, Charlie Smith, George Strutt, E.C. Smith, Horace Smith, Jack Taylor, Vinton Stubb. I knew who they were. And it ached me to see their manhood being trampled on like that. And here comes Kingsley Tweed to Mr. Bateson. They're getting $10 an hour. We're only making $1.20. We know more than them. Boy, I said, you don't call me no damn boy. This ain't Mississippi. I looked at this cracker right in his eyeballs, and you could see the sweat pouring off his face, because I knew that was the first time in his life he'd ever been spoken like that, spoken to like that by a black boy. The MPs had guns down there like that. D.C. didn't utter a word. That's the sad part, but I understand. I didn't understand then. I call them a bunch of damn Uncle Toms. I didn't understand their economic plight. They needed that job. I needed it also, but they, I suppose, needed it more than I did. I got fired, escorted off the base at gunpoint. I ought to have been like everybody else, mentally dislocated. But I understood something that they did not understand. And that was assimilation leads to the decapitation of other people's culture. And integration brings about their death. And my father would say to me, boy, you open your mouth again down there, Kings? I said, yeah, I did. I just couldn't help it. He said, never mind. I would have done the same thing if I was 18 and I had as much sense as you. But what you should have done was jump up and buck him in the teeth. I said, no, 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 Daddy, they would have shot me had I done that.
Well, with a large family, it's a very busy, busy household. I can tell you that.
Bake the chicken pie, bake that chicken pie, put the flavor up, you know, bake that chicken pie. Little piece of me, got a little piece of me.
Religion was one of the most important things. We had to go to Sunday school, we had to go to church, we had to be in the church choirs.
If you ever needed somebody before,
Knowing Kingsley, he got out to play the secular music, and he would play it in the house and whatnot. Mom and Dad would listen to it, but, you know, they didn't want us out singing in the nightclubs and stuff like that. But somehow he managed to do it.
if you ever needed the Lord before you.
We went to Grace Church in the morning and Herd Chapel in the afternoons. And Kingsley decided he wanted to be at Herd Chapel when he became a young man.
It's still the most important, single most important thing in my life. The African Methodist Episcopal Church couldn't be anything else, don't want to be anything else. They caused me to be the way I am. Reverend DeShields getting up, preaching all that, what people considered to be violent sermons, racial segregationist attitudes, praying for the breaking down of this citadel of racialism, which is a threat to some people in Bermuda. Reverend Johnson getting up with his barrel of a voice and a heart like a volcano, you know, lungs like earthquakes, thundering out across Glebe Road.
Once we all went to church, he was preaching, and my daddy said, good, good, good sermon. The boy could preach some stuff, but he too long.
You need him now. Quite early in life, the oligarchy was apparent to me. That is to say, those people who had control over every facet of human activity in Bermuda, politically, economic policy, economic polity. These few families controlled everything. It seemed that this was wrong and something had to be done about it. I mean, every aspect of our lives is governed by segregation. The graveyards were segregated. The pulpits, the churches, where you parked your horse and your cart, the hotels that existed, the guest houses, Darrell's Island, where the planes landed out there in Hamilton Harbor. When black people got to the pier to come up into Front Street, it was segregated. The cinema was segregated. It was ugly. 1959 was a rather heady year, or rather the heady year of protest in Bermuda. Particularly, it was the year of the boycott, the year when we deemed it was time that segregation be kicked out of Bermuda. My role in the boycott was to keep the protests going. Oh, the boycott accomplished many, many things. Oligarchy man said, hey, after a little while, when he decided that we were not going to negotiate with him. We didn't negotiate with you when you brought in your policies or policy of racial discrimination, when your policy of dehumanization, your policy that determined that I should not be educated. You didn't negotiate then. You done it arbitrarily. Desegregate the hotels and the restaurants and the cinemas and every other facility where you use segregation as a crutch to maintain your own bloody importance. When the word came to Bermuda that they wanted a young lad to train in trade unionism in London, I was selected. But when I got to London, I discovered that the TUC were looking for a special kind of a black individual. But they had me, argumentative and provocative. I must say, I wasn't received gracefully at all. These were the people who were the lectures in the Congress College about international affairs and the struggle for independence in Africa. I discovered after having listened to them that they simply were not interested in the independence movement in Africa. It was so demeaning, so patronizing, and of course that set me off. Now, who the hell are you to be contending that Africans are not fit for government? Mind you, seeing what we have today, they may have been right. And so after the first 3 or 4 days in these lecture halls, I mean, I was like a leper. Not even the African lads were speaking to me. I gathered very little information, real usable information, from the TUC in London. I met a very dear lady, solid, determined, strong black woman, Claudia Jones. She understood the philosophy, she understood the ethics of her socialist learning and leaning, and was a tremendous inspiration to me. I arrived back in Bermuda in January 1960. And so when I got back to Bermuda, they didn't recognize me. There was this talk about my becoming Secretary General. And the brethren gathered around again over at my house, and we plotted this course so I could become Secretary General in the Union. And that was considered to be the key post. And so eventually I was elected Secretary General. Mr. Wilson was elected President at that meeting, and I knew there was confrontation, there was serious trouble. And you could feel the tension, it was already there. Pre-London, post-London, pre-imprisonment, post-imprisonment. Because he was one of the people who objected to my being released from prison, too, after it was discovered by the police that 150 pounds that I was supposed to have taken from old man Schrader of Smithfield, that, you know, that son of a bitch, Mr. Wilson, knew that the police had evidence that it was Mr. Schrader's son who took his father's money rather than me. I mean, I had been visiting that old man for about 10 years. I didn't need nobody's 150 goddamn pounds, but they gave me a year in jail for it. And that year in jail cost me a lot of my way of thinking and way of life. It altered my whole personality in a sense. My ambition was always to be a priest in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That was my drowning ambition. So Mr. Wilson and I had this thunderous, rapturous, if you like. I say rapturous because that's what it was like. It was like thunder and lightning, bolts shooting between us, you know, but with my own kind of innate emotional African genius, I was able to rhapsodize my imprisonment and all the speculation about what I was and who I was and what my ambitions were. And I became Secretary General of the Bermuda Industrial Union, and Mr. Wilson was undermining me from day one. Because I prepared the agendas for our weekly meetings every Tuesday night, and sometimes on Fridays. Everything I placed on the agenda, Mr. Wilson objected to and wrote a separate agenda. Now that brought about an immediate conflict. It was an insufferable situation, and my task, it seemed to me, was slipping away from me. Joe Mills jumped up. He was the last person I would have expected to have gotten up to pass a resolution demanding my ousting. So I resigned. But it wasn't very pleasant. I took my books right there and then, and some of the things I could glean from the office, some of the stuff I regarded as pertinent. But I left that office well organized. There was a record. Everything I did as Secretary General in that office, I left it there, on file. I didn't have a job. I wasn't able to save anything out of the 10 pounds the Bermuda Industrial Union paid me. My plight was dire. I remember I applied for a job at Gorham Lumber Company. The moment they found out that it was Kingsley Tweed, I was really too in short shrift, you know. I applied for a job at the Bermuda Bakery. I applied for a job at the Princess Hotel, the Diana Hotel, the Castle Harbor Hotel, Austin Wilson, Horace Smith, Wilbur Richardson. Randolph Martin, God bless him, said, Tootie, you must come up the shop and work with me. And we had a beautiful relationship. I went to work in one black woman's house, and she told Randolph, I don't want that boy Tweed in my house. He's a communist. Randolph went inside, and I took care of the window screens from outside, and we got around it that way, but she never spoke to me. I found out that her daughter was rather interested in me, though. I suspect, I thought perhaps my reputation had preceded me, or perhaps my rather robust physique. Our work sort of dried up. I decided to just be a professional agitator. And so I started holding meetings. I had more meetings than people know about. I was a socialist, I've never denied that. But then the victimization started on me. The government knew via the telephone company every telephone call I had with everyone in Bermuda of every kind, of every nature. I know for a fact that my mother had threatening telephone calls. And it frightened her. I said, you know, Tootie, darling, you have to be extremely careful here. So I'm getting rather funny telephone calls here. People threatening you. Be careful. And I took her advice. I started looking over my shoulders, walking down Dalis Bay, down Duck Hill, up North Shore Road. I looked over my shoulders day and night because I actually felt, for the first time in my life, I felt afraid. I opened the door. I see this policeman standing there. And I say, yeah, what can I do for you? And he said, look, there's some serious stuff going on. There are some white men. They've got a bullet with your name on it. You take an airplane and leave this island this weekend. Just go. Take a plane going anywhere. Because if you stay in this country, you'll be a dead man come Monday morning. A dead man come Monday morning.
I remember distinctly, he called from Hamilton asking if I knew where his passport was. I asked why would he need it. He said he couldn't explain then, but he would tell me when he got home. And he was there like in a half an hour and came in and he looked kind of strange and, you know, I'm curious, what's happening? You know, I just felt within myself something wasn't right. It was something I didn't really want to hear.
They wanted my black ass in jail and they wanted it dead. Period.
Karen was only 6 months. We had only gotten married just about a year. And I'm carrying Kathy now, 3 months pregnant with her. And he's talking about leaving. And he told me that he would prefer I not go to the airport to see him off because he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to get out or not, you know. And he figured it would be embarrassing for me if they stopped them at the airport.
Leaving Marlene and my mother and father and my daughter, who's now a grown woman, of course, was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. And it was always my intention, you know, to bring them along, you know, but hell, I mean, I left Bermuda one step ahead of the police.
It was just too overwhelming to see him leave that way.
As a matter of fact, Speedy Ming was there. And Sergeant Allen, you know, Willie Allen, Doc Allen's brother, Mort Allen's brother, Tackbone's brother, Willie, Sergeant, married to Connie.
I kind of sat by the phone thinking maybe somebody would call and say they had him in prison or wherever, you know, just not knowing exactly whether he was going to be able to leave the island.
And he said, Tootie, "You in trouble?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, put this on." Now, he used to wear a little round hat on his head, a tam, I suppose we call it, like a Scotsman's hat. And he said, "Put this on." It was like a disguise, I suppose. And Speedy Ming had a similar concoction because he knew I was in trouble.
But I didn't hear anything after several hours, so I figured, well, he made the flight and he was on his way.
It is well, it is well with my soul. I had $2 when I got off the airplane. I walked from 42nd Street and 8th Avenue up to 121st Street with 2 heavy goddamn suitcases. It was a painful experience. I'm scared to spend that $1 for a glass of water, a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea, or a hot dog, because I was hungry. Every telephone box I saw, I called my uncle Edmund. I could see the house, 121st Street, coming up in Morningside, and he was up to the window. And he came down on the pavement and he almost collapsed in his arms. The following day, we went down to the Social Security office and the man filled out the sheet. He said, "Well, you don't need to say this is a black guy. You don't need to say that." And the guy was very astute. I mean, a real African nationalist. I mean, fortunate for me. "You did all that non-immune?" I said, "Hell, you can have 2 Social Security cards." I joined the AME Church immediately, St. Matthew's up in the Bronx. And that kept me busy because it was rotten, and we renovated that completely. And then I joined a group called the Lumumba Society that had a demonstration that went down and threw bricks at the United Nations. And I thought, well, I ought not be involved in this kind of protest because they would arrest me and deport my black self back down to Bermuda. I wish I could use you for a minute. Is that possible? You don't want to be in this shot. I got this job making beds, cots for babies and so on like that. I just sent Marlene the second or first paycheck I got.
I remember hearing from him 2 or 3 times by phone, but during those years it was so expensive to even make a long-distance phone call. So I accepted that.
It was this core of African nationalists in Harlem. And so I aligned myself with them and I spoke with the Stepladder Brigade. I was preaching every night on 125th Street and 7th Avenue, every night, man, you know. And my crowd was by far the largest, you know, because it was dangerous stuff. And then I knew that the police were onto me because of what the policemen now by the United Nations told me. I had to steer clear of the authorities. And so I went and saw my bishop and went over to New Jersey and got with Reverend Cartwright at St. Luke's AME Church. I was then employed by the Blazer Youth Development Corporation. And to be quite honest with you, Bermuda almost became not absent from my mind. That would be untrue. But there was a paling, if you know, because I had to put certain things behind me if I was going to make any progress, financially, economically, socially, whatever was required to be a successful man. I got a letter from the American Draft Board, and they wanted to recruit me with a view of sending me to Vietnam. I went down to the draft board and told them that I wasn't interested in serving in the Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, anything else, because I wouldn't be going to Vietnam. And in the meantime, we were burying 8, 9, 10, 11 black boys from St. Luke AME Church, boys from the greater Newark area, coming back home in bags to be killed in Vietnam, you know, and it's rather disturbing, it's one of the worst disturbing features of that. And, yeah, that's rather disturbing. We're looking for Mr. Tweed. We're looking for Mr. Tweed. And it was the immigration and the military police. As I burnt up the draft card. Put your hand on your head. Don't move. Lie down on the floor. And I had no hesitation in thinking that they would carry out the ultimate sanction. And that would have been to shoot me. And I didn't want any gunshot wounds in my body going home to my Lord and Master, God Almighty. And I went with them handcuffed, trussed up like a chicken. They would not give me bail. They said that they had to get papers from Bermuda, and finally the papers from Bermuda arrived. They behaved as though I was this great revolutionary that had come to shoot the president. And I suppose why they got that impression, because I told them if you give me a gun, I'd shoot the brigadier or the president. They kept me there for 4 months. And somehow or the other, I didn't have any fear. And no, that's not quite true. I thought, well, you'll not be able to send me back to Bermuda. I'm not going to let that happen. And for a moment, I looked at the wire, this wire cage I was in at the top of the building, looked up at that wire cage and said, I know how to get out of here, but it's how to get down 34 stories. And I thought, well, the quickest way down would be to jump. The quickest way down would be to jump. And it's quite a serious matter when a man contemplates in circumstances like that to jump off a 34-story building, but I actually contemplated jumping off that building. I thought, well, I'd die before I let you send me back to Bermuda. And I had 2 Jewish advocates, one who was supposed to be the advocate on behalf of the state, and the other one was one of the part-time rabbis in the synagogue, Mal Hensman, okay? And he knew the prosecutor. So Mal had a word with him, and he changed his whole attitude toward me. He said something to me, look, we don't want to send you to Bermuda. He said that if we send you back to Bermuda, your life, Mr. Tweed, would be worth not a penny. They decided to let me have bail, $2,000. That's all was required. A little man by the name of Pete, a little Jewish guy, worked in the project. He says, we needed cash. He said, I got $2,000 cash under my pillow. I'm going to get it now. And he came back with $2,000. And he gave it to the little black sister there. And she recorded it, gave him a receipt, and I went back to do my work. When peace, like a river, attendeth my way. Look, let me tell you something, bro. One of the most inspiring times of my life is sitting down with Paul Robeson on a bench in front of the boundary of Columbia University, and I spoke to that man for about a year. Even when I moved from 125th Street, I still went back and spoke to him every morning, and it was an incredible period for me, because he told me some things about black people and some struggles he had been in, and I thought, well, hell, I ain't done nothing. And then I met J. Rogers, you know, the man who wrote Man, Sex, and Race and Nature Knows No Color. I talked with him, you know. I spoke with him, touched him. He's an amazing man. But it was here, on 125th Street, I learned that my calling was to Africa and its people. 1965, I decided I'd better start making plans to leave America. And I left and came to England. I came straight to London and found out that they only gave me 2 or 3 months to stay in London, so I went straight down to Zimbabwe. I arrived in Zimbabwe in 1965, and immediately I got dragged into, if you like, it seemed almost eternal struggle that was going on. I traveled out there when it was Southern Rhodesia, a dangerous time in the midst of a war in 1965, you know, trying to find some place to settle. See, and this Pan-African thing, I was instinctively drawn to it, and I found a lot of instructive elements in its philosophy, but bringing man together, fair exchange. It made it from Salisbury in southern Rhodesia, up to Bulawayo, where I met Joshua Nkomo in a little village up there. The black people in Rhodesia had nothing. They were denied everything. And to some extent, that hasn't changed today. Someone took almost, they say 24 million acres of land. They took 34 million acres of land and shared it up between 100 white men. Now, if you call that justice, British or otherwise, that's just an appalling state. And that's why the struggle took place. They had to fight. There was no way that they could not fight. They were fighting for their very survival. I'm told my guys were going out there sitting in the bush for days, sometimes weeks, waiting for a redneck South African to come by so they can put a bullet in his head, because it was fraught with dangerous circumstances. I went as an observer, but I got involved, if you like. It was impossible not to have gotten involved, and it, in some respects, was a rather stupid thing to do because some of the African brethren didn't understand who I was and what my purpose was, and they referred to me as an expat, if you like. You don't speak my language. I said, well, hell, you don't speak mine. I said, you have to get some socialist elementary education that will make you recognize your brother. And if he's willing to participate in what is your army or your insurrection, you embrace him. Whilst I was in Rhodesia, I toyed with the idea that, look, I'm going to stay here. But I thought this fight needed to be transferred someplace else. I wanted to take that fight to the very hub. And the very hub of that paganism, if you like, was Britain, was England. Coming back to London was indeed a revelation for me because I then saw this almost dense cloud of blackness, brownness, black poor people, white poor people, some who were anti-black people. That was something else we had to deal with. But I lived my life as though I'm walking on a sea of glass, and any day that sheet of glass will break. But the thing for me is that rare persuasion that drives a man. And what I found in England when I come back from Rhodesia, I found men actually driven by a sense of rarity, moral rarity. But it was rage. It wasn't about actually wanting to kill somebody, to cause more widows and orphans. It wasn't that kind of rage. It was a rage that wanted to change the world. And we found people like Brother Matthews down by Hyde Park, man with no hands. We met people like Reen Webb, all our AF men. People like Skinny Wretch, like Whiskers, like Big Froggy and Small Froggy. I mean, these are real people, okay? Some of them were old men by now, but they all came together and we joined in that Black Power experiment. Yeah, Portno Road, you know? We've had 2 mass demonstrations up against police brutality, and the police station is just down there. They would arrest people here in the center of the street, take you down there, and beat the living cane out of you. But the demonstration took place from here all the way over to Kilburn Park Road. And it was ferocious. And in 1966, 67, in Britain, I was in a wilderness place. A land that lacked the milk of human kindness, if you like, that black cohesion and understanding. You understand? It was desperate. Anyone in Great Britain was subject from 1822 to be charged with being a suspicious person. S-U-S, sus, a suspicious person. In other words, in a place where it was designated you had no right to be. I was arrested for sus in Ledbroke Grove, 100 feet from where we had our family home. Left home at 6 o'clock in the morning, and 5 minutes past 6, I was in a police car What are you doing out here this time in the morning? He said, I'm going to work. And P.C. Skinner, niggers don't work, niggers don't work. I said, well, this nigger works, you know. Then they drove up on the pavement and said, you ever been arrested before for sus? I said, no, well, you are now, you know, and they took me to the police station, gave me 3 months in jail, and I haven't committed an offense, not yet. And that's the plight of 17,000, 13, 15, 14,000 other black men in this country having committed no offense. And when you lock up innocents, I think you've perhaps heard me say this before, you turn a saint into a raging lunatic. Amen. 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 In '68, I decided to make some speeches up and down the length and breadth of this country. But the one that came to the attention of the British authorities, the Home Office, the speech I made with regard to Joshua Nkomo, which the newspapers interpreted in this country as being a speech about Black Britain's call to shoot white Britons. We didn't advocate that. What I said was that if black people are going to be continually murdered in Rhodesia, perhaps we'd better start thinking about revenge in the streets of Great Britain. That might entail killing some white people. Every time 10 black men die in Salisbury, Rhodesia, then perhaps you ought to have 10 white men that ought to die in Great Britain. And it was words like that there. It's spoken off the top of my head because we were angry, you understand. And I didn't see that the European man ought to have a monopoly on shooting black men in Africa or elsewhere, wherever you choose to shoot him. And I came up with that sort of thing. And I was again in the process of being hunted. Lord, they hunted for me in Brixton. They hunted for me. I mean, they ran out of places to hunt for me in England. It's another frightening period because jail was staring me in the face. I mean, I had to go underground for a long time with 5 or 6 other guys. You couldn't show your face out there because they had special branch people looking for you everywhere.
I can recall my brother and I rummaging through briefcases that we were not supposed to touch, that presumably contained things that we were not supposed to see. There were references to a person, and of course at that time, I was unaware of who this person was. I knew I would say to my brother, or my brother would say to me, who is this Kingsley Tweed? Why does Daddy have these newspaper clippings? As long as I have known my father, I knew him as Bruce King. And it was an awakening when I discovered that that was the alias and that his real name was Kingsley Tweed.
Lord only knows I took all the big blows. Now I'm saying thank you, Lord, and I'm playing and singing this song for you.
My family is made up of myself, an older brother, Nigel, younger sister, Malawi, my mother, Ann, and my father.
We were conscious that there were some people who had, and there were others who did not have.
That if you were hungry, you could always get something to eat, not that we always had a lot.
So they came to our house, in season and out of season, for food and just to talk. Black people, white people. A hungry man is a hungry man. A child in need of milk needs milk. Yeah, it's in your interest.
We were surprised when we found out that other people's homes were not like our home.
And because this is just a meal for one here, had I known I was going to have 4, I would have used a rain barrel, you know? But every time you damn greedy Bermudians come up my house, you know, we didn't cook, you understand? You that buy Williams and my other brothers inside there, don't bring them here no more. Make this the first and last time, okay? And I warn you in my house, go home and cook your own food. Okay. I mean, that's really completed, actually. There comes a time when there's joy and there's no peace. There comes a time when there's joy and there's peace. That's why I'm singing my song.
At the time, my father was a cabinet maker, carpenter, builder. On the weekends, he used to play at a bar. As I grew and became more conscious, and as I began to look at and become more aware of the plight of black people in Britain, I developed in me a thirst to know. And I believed that my father knew what I needed to know. And so I would often look forward to those times when we could discuss things, and I was particularly interested in his participation. And so he would often make allusions to. I remember arguing with Malcolm about Africa before he went to Mecca. And I'd say, wow, he knew Malcolm? Or I'd say, Daddy, I came across a book, J.A. Rogers. And, oh, yes, I remember going to J.A. Rogers' house in Harlem. He knew J.A. Rogers? And over time, more and more pieces were filled in, and we became, I would like to think, dialogue partners.
Mother was out working for J. Lyons for £7 a week, and father was probably unemployed. And there were all of these children in the street, no education, turned out of school. And they were streaming schools, so that was pretty bad. And we decided to do something about that. And one would have thought the government would have applauded our efforts because we were instinctively drawn to black children. But then we discovered that living in a community that was 100% in fact white, we couldn't just really cater for black children. And so we took on board this total community, made it a community effort. And so the Community Action Center was designed to, increase the possibilities for education, technical training, further education. We set up a committee and we wrote a constitution and we were registered as a charity. We had some 3,000 young men and women come through our doors from 1974 when we started the construction of the building until 1993.
I can remember watching him lay down the concrete floors. I was there while they were mixing the cement. I was there while he was orchestrating people. He was a major contributor to the building of what was the first building that I know of in London or even England that was built by black people from the ground up. And it existed with its sister building, the Teamwork Training Trust. The Teamwork building was where they used to train mechanics to fix automobiles and that kind of thing. And the Community Action Center was where they trained people in carpentry, electronics, and building, and that kind of thing. For a time period, my father had disconnected himself from the Community Action Center because of differences he had with some of the people that were running it. But when the building got in trouble and they were getting ready to lose the building, they always knew where to come and find my father. And so it was on one such occasion that they finally, a delegation, I imagine, came again to our home, pleading with my father to come back and help them save the building. And it was under those circumstances that he then returned to the CAC building. And so it was during this period that the Amenities Trust performed a coup d'etat that enabled them to seize control of the Teamwork Training Trust building. And shortly after that time, they attempted to do the same thing with the Community Action Center. And my father would work on putting together the case to defend and keep the Community Action Center for the community.
He went to court.
We became experts in the appeal process. And we would be up all night writing briefs, and we would have to hand deliver the briefs to various parties, and we'd have to struggle to find the money to pay to file for these briefs. And my father would do all of this out of his pocket. We had no legal aid, no assistance from the community. It was almost as if the black community had resigned itself to just losing the building. And so when he would get jobs and other people would get paid, the portion of the money that should have gone to him was gone to pay the lights on the building. The money that should have gone to him was gone to pay to file a legal brief. So often he was left without money and without real sustenance, simply because he had a commitment and he refused to allow the Amenities Trust to either treat him or us or treat that building, which was the bastion of blackness in Ladbroke Grove, in the sense that it represented a symbol of independence. And in many ways, it is the classic struggle of David and Goliath. And even though they subsequently took the building, I would say that the battle isn't over, and people need to remember that David had 5 stones and we've only used a few.
I started an AME church in 1959 in Britain with the Reverend Witter right over there in Peckham Rye.
And that represented either the first or one of the first AME churches that was established in England. When I expressed a commitment to go into the ministry, my father decided that we would start a church. So we sought out a Dr. Jacobs over in Wandsworth, in Battersea, and we tried to join with him and worship with him, and he had a small, fledgling, dying kind of congregation that wasn't going anywhere.
When I left there, we had about 45 barefoot black people coming in there, say, we found a man who could play a piano and sing like that, and folk just joined the church. Hallelujah time over there.
When my father and I started, there was just my father and I. In 1988, Bishop Vernon Byrd was assigned at the General Conference to the 16th Episcopal District, of which London is a part. As it happened, Bishop Byrd and my father go back to Bermuda days. By the time Bishop Byrd came, we had around 250 or 300 members in the church that we started with him and I. 2 years later,
there was a law in London, England, which says that a preacher of another country cannot be ordained unless that institution which he belongs owned a church building.
We have some pictures
Right.
of one of your visits, and it was in a building called the Community Action Center.
It was the Kingsley Tree building. And that's why I tried to tell him to use that as our passport into England.
Anyway, he ordained me, had the ceremony in the church, and it was a glad time, and that's when Nicholas was ordained.
his commitment to growth would outweigh any selfish inclinations that he might have. And out of the 250 or 300 members that we had, my father created 9 other congregations.
And of course, the brethren, got angry. Who the hell is he? How the hell can he organize 9 churches within a few years? But that's what I did.
As in most things, when somebody sees something that looks like it's progressive and productive, everybody wants to have a piece, and there's always a danger that it can be pulled apart.
The AME Church has let itself down. I haven't let it down because, you know something? Those brothers haven't added to what we built up out there.
To his detriment, rather than engage in a selfish and futile power struggle with no power. It's like dogs fighting over a bone without a bone. Withdrew and said, well, look, you have 9 congregations with people in it. But if all you want to do is fight, then you go ahead and I'm going to step back and let you go and do it, but I'm going to go do the work. And so even after that, he went and continued and continues to set up churches.
I'm sad because there's a perfectly good building then, and it ought to be used for the worship of black people. We just want to purchase the property before one of the Sikh congregations come by and say, yeah, we got a big edifice in South Hampstead, because we know that we can fill this place up with 340, 500 people.
So even despite some of the shortcomings and some of the other things that were taking place, he has continued in his commitment to the AME Church.
So far, when I look back, it's like awesome wonder. You know that thing about I see the stars? You know, I hear this thing calling, you know, God, your awesome wonder. And I wonder how I got over it, you know? And it's the things that I retrieve from way back there that keeps me busy and active and reflective.
Mr. King, you need to come on to certain things like this. This should be your #1 interest now, because Bermuda is a totally different place. I said, you can virtually go anywhere we like now. So, but Bermuda is still very much under control by the same powers that be from an economic standpoint. The only thing that we have been able to remove one of the legs of power that they have, which is the political power. But you should deal with your personal issue, because that's the #1 thing. Because, and I quoted something to him that I always remember, it said, to thine own self be true. And being true to yourself, then it'll be difficult for you to be false to anybody else. You've got to be true to yourself.
This invitation from the PLP, which is not the first time, incidentally, that they've invited me to Bermuda. I'm going on a pilgrimage, you know, so it's not perhaps as political as might first appear, my arriving during this election. So I'm availing myself of the opportunity that they've presented me.
Yeah. What are you doing down there, sweetheart? I'm clearing my garden. But when I want something doing properly, I do it myself.
Take a picture of the dog, because it's the last time you'll be seeing him, man. I'm gonna sell him to a Korean man.
Yeah? My dog runs every time he sees you. Get off.
In fact, I may have a meal Sunday before I leave.
Yeah.
Meal a dog.
Leave my dog alone.
Sell him to the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, I'll fucking sell you Chinese, not my bloody dog. They get more meat from you. My dog's that big.
This is an uncultured lady, forgive her.
Oh, no, I don't know where they got him from.
Koreans, they love dogs. Okay, see you later, huh? I'll bring you back a bottle or something when I come back. I don't touch the stuff myself. And please take out the bit of...
Oh, you ain't, have you?
Yes, of course we got it. But for me, it's not going to the PLP or castigate the UBP or anybody else. I'm just going on a mission. Nervous? Hell no, not really. Apprehensive? Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because I've got a simple, solid story to tell. Bye for now. Oh, no. But listen, I really don't need any instructions about those people. Believe me.
Come on, go straight to them.
The granddaughter, Uncle Kingsley. The granddaughter. The granddaughter. It's your granddaughter. Karen's daughter. That's his granddaughter. Take a picture. Yeah. Want me to keep it? Once you got a picture of his granddaughter. And Barbara. Get on it. Chase Sweetie.
Don't see you.
My daddy. Greg Kingsley.
Coming back to Bermuda wasn't clear until just a couple of days ago. He would tell you, I decided I wasn't coming anyhow, but having spoke to Carlton and people like that, he said, well, Teddy, give it a try, you know. And I knew it was going to be a raw, sticky, stinking moment that turns you inside out. You know, like a buttercup. Turns you out. Hey there, little baby sister.
Baby sister, we used to fight.
Because you won't be good to me. I'm singing for myself right now. That's where the veranda used to be, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
I knew my granny had 12 children, but I never counted them up, and I never knew nothing about Uncle Kingsley. That's why it seems so strange. My dad's got this brother that's come out of nowhere, you know what I mean?
And what's your name?
Lydia.
Look, you better write all the names down on a piece of something for me, okay? Really. Everybody's name. First name and your date of birth, okay? Write it on here so I really know, okay? Yeah. Oh my God Almighty. Come here, boy, let me see you.
How you doing?
Boy, I don't know Bobby.
You don't know me?
No, isn't that something? How you doing?
All right.
God Almighty, let me hold you tight, boy. Look at you.
Mm-hmm.
Look at you. Isn't that something? I knew you were born like I realize now. You were born after, while I was still here, you know, but I just blanked out a lot of things, you know.
One thing my brother did tell me, he said if you were a Tweed, you suffered. He told me that for sure.
And this is why the family never spoke his name.
I never heard nothing about Uncle Kingsley. And then Bonnie and Kelly, they went to England. My Aunt Barbara, my Aunt Mio gave them his address and phone number, but they never called him because they felt that they'll get in trouble or something. So they never called or nothing.
Family's too beautiful. I discovered I've got the most beautiful family in the world. I never knew that I had all of these nephews and nieces and grandnieces. It's like about 4,000 or 5,000 of us. They used to have a little shop either there, or it used to be up here.
I'll show you where I went to school. Right here in this building.
And me.
Have I come up the right hill?
Yeah, you're going on Devonshire Church, aren't you? Yeah, well, this is it should take you right over to where the post office used to be. See? Haven't forgotten. Turn around. You're driving all the, you don't have a license, that's your problem. Go up and then back, okay, into there. Crazy people. Tweeds. It's you who don't know where you are.
Shut up, eh?
You made the right turn, we had to come down here, you see? Yeah. You gotta go down here, this little road here. You can't get lost.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's go down further, go around the other road.
No, Jubilee Road takes you around by Elliott School.
Remember this road?
Of course I remember. John Cox isn't asked the land he stole now. You Tweeds are so damn bullheaded. Nobody can't tell you nothing. You think you know every friggin' thing.
Shut your blunking face, man. Shut up your mouth.
And park your car anywhere around here, man. Lump by the yellow lines, too. Don't go any further. Park it right here by the tree. God, you're hard-headed. Pop, Barbara, bring it back a little bit and park it by the tree. Before you cuss me and tell me I don't know what I'm saying. Oh, God, this is an awful feeling. You sure we're in the right place now. Finally got here, Jack boy. They tell me you've been a bad boy while I was away. Oh, my. Brushing little cedar berries off your grave now. You remember we used to go and hunt them cedar berries up there? Yeah, they got you right under the cedar berry tree. You can eat until your belly bust. Oh, me. Going over and see Mama and Daddy and George and Kunk, Aunt Sophie, yeah, James and Humphrey and Sam. And after that, I don't think I want to go to any more graveyards in my life. Not even when I'm dead, I don't want to put me in the graveyard. Okay? Because this has been both a good experience, a loving experience, but it's also been very troublesome for me. And what was especially troublesome for me is that I wasn't here, you know? When you were facing your own mortal end, so to speak. Okay, I think I've had enough of this now. I'll come back and see you perhaps before I leave, huh? If not, I'll get that mad by Jimmy, that son of yours, and Troy to check on you. Okay? See you later. Hope your Aunt Barbara's got the right space. If not, I'll have to come down and take these flowers on the other side, because a lot of cedar trees down there. I don't know. Could it be just like your Aunt Barbara to have me put these expensive flowers on the wrong hole? So I'm saying. Oh, me. Can I walk and hold your hand a little bit? He's been laying over there a long time, but it doesn't seem like that to me. So, you understand? It doesn't seem like that to me. Okay, Jack boy. All right, hey, how you doing? Hi. Hey, how you doing? Good. All right, not too bad, pal. Okay.
It's so funny that I just saw Voices Rise.
Yeah.
And then I see your face in the paper.
Look out, look out, look out, look out, look out, look like. I'm here, but I don't know for how long.
For real?
Yeah, well, might be, you know.
Where were you all this time?
I've been over in England and around other places, like, you know.
They call it exile.
All right. All right.
Growing up, I always wanted to know who my father was. Even though I didn't know him, I liked what he stood for. And I always saw him, from reading the articles, I could tell that he had revolutionary ideas and thoughts. And my mother always told me I was just like him with my ways of thinking and things that I did. So I always felt as though he was a hero, even though I didn't know him. From the age of 14, I started looking for him. When I got a little older, I ended up going through a search agency. Before that, I tried just calling directory assistants, speaking with telephone operators, calling information, trying to just find him by name. When I spoke with the lady at the search agency, she told me if I could get a social security number or something of that nature, it might help with my search. However, I wasn't able to obtain that social security number, so I just sort of gave up for a while.
Hey, how you doing? Now it is my special privilege to welcome home a Bermudian legend who has returned home after more than 40 years in the wilderness of exile. Bermuda has given birth to no living son more heroic, more illustrious than Kingsley Tweed. A man whose facility with words, whose elocution and turn of phrase have helped him to earn a living as he turned these skills to God's work.
Look out.
Through the film, When Voices Rise, we have become aware of the regrettable reasons that caused Kingsley Tweed to flee Bermuda. But even more regrettable are the reasons that kept him in exile, fearful of returning to his homeland. If affirmation that a new Bermuda came into being in 1998 is needed, this patriot's return provides it. It is fitting that he is here with us in Bermuda on the eve of this first general election of one man, one vote. The first general election in a new century and in a new millennium. Reverend Dr. Tweed, thank you for what you have done for Bermuda.
My pleasure.
Thank you for gracing Alaska Hall with your presence.
All right.
And thank you for being with us at this very special and historic time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't want to kiss nobody else.
I'm just curious to know whether you're overwhelmed at this stage, or whether you've been able to absorb enough to give an answer to the question of biggest differences so far since you've been away.
Oh, there are no differences really.
No differences.
No, the sea is still in the same place. Dock Hill is still Dock Hill. You know, I can tell you that my family are as they've always been. Delightful and a joy to be with, you know. I am one piece of goddamn diplomat, you know. Well, I'm telling you,
I know that.
I'm going in for some new friggin' skills, son. You know what I'm saying? No, you're not. No, I'm not in your liver. Ah, you tell that to somebody else. I've lived there for 45 years, and the way you have treated black people in Great Britain as this country reminds me of bloody South Africa. Now, you go back and tell Tony Blair. That is my message to Tony Blair. Now, it's you shut up. And you're not a socialist if you're a new member of the Labour Party. No, you're a damn fool. That's what you are. A little funny Scotsman like you. Okay. How you doing?
I'm from the Sun.
Oh, I see. How are you?
Fine.
Okay.
I was going to try and hook you for an interview, but I...
Okay. Well, we're going to have some time. We're going to have some time. No, don't push me. We're going to have some time. Now, we're going to have some time.
I'll call Barbara anyway.
We'll have some time to chat.
Okay.
You can get a better interview from the Scotsman up there. Ask them about how they're teaming up against the black indigenous population of Britain. I've got a good story for you, too. Oh, I wouldn't do that. And I just wanted to frighten the Scotsman because I know when he gets back to London, he'll be out there prosecuting and persecuting black people in the name of the Labour Party and socialist politics, and I'm not having it. But up there in Toronto and Columbia, what's that place out there? British Columbia? Yeah, that's Scotland. And you know what they've done with the natives up there? They exterminated them all, you know? Yeah. And they'll exterminate the blacks in London, too, England, if they can get a chance to, under new Labour Party politics. I really don't think black people here have grown. To any great extent. Black people are not controlling anything in this country. Nothing. And I just picked it up within 24 hours.
You coming out?
Hey. You got the book in there. How you doing? Don't forget the book. That book's... Hey, how you doing? Not too bad, not too bad. Jesus Christ. Buddy? I found David. This is Cordell. Yeah. Cordell, oh, God damn it. You all right, Kingsley? Hey! How you doing? Oh, Jesus Christ, Joe.
Hey, how you doing?
Look at that.
No, I say, oh, well, I recognize you're so popular. Not so popular.
Yes, sir. Let me tell you something. If I didn't have to go down to the park,
That's what I'm doing.
I'd knock you down right now.
What's up, boy?
Look, I'm going to catch up with them politicians down there. Okay, hey, how you doing? Okay, all right. Hey, how you doing? You guys are making me very emotional right now. You know, look, I gotta go because I'll miss this guy down really down there. Hey, how you doing? All right? I'll miss the ready, man. Hold that, brother. How you doing? All right?
Brother, hard, man.
I'm gonna come in and have a drink with you guys before I go. Hey,
No, Jack, what's up over here?
I'm Jack reincarnated.
You look like...
I'm sorry, you sound like... Okay, you guys coming to the park?
Yeah,
all right. What are you hanging around here for?
Last week. Where is he?
You gotta save your voice for tonight.
Yeah, I know.
Kingsley Tweed, make your way to the stage. Kingsley Tweed, you need to make your way to the stage.
You know Muppet?
Yes, sir, man.
Long time no see.
I was following his activity every day, reading the newspapers, looking at places where he would be speaking. He's been here since Sunday. He hasn't contacted me yet, so I'll go and see him, but I won't let him know I'm there. And I went to Bernard's Park. I didn't want anyone to see me because I didn't want anybody to push me. I stood in the parking lot for about a half an hour, and then I saw some trees alongside of the park and just watched everything from the trees. My father came on stage.
I've just got a very
He
short
said, I have a story to tell you tonight.
It isn't going to be long, and it isn't going to be complicated.
And I said to myself, I've got a story to tell you too.
Sometimes the burden gets heavy, and the political process sometimes weighs us down. But dip into that future, and the world belongs to you and I. You take your time out there, and you get out there on Thursday, and you vote. And you vote PLP.
I felt as though everything that was happening didn't really feel like it was real. And I drove to John Smith's Bay after I left the park, and I just sat there in the dark, just staring out in the water. It was so much for me to absorb, and my emotions were all over the place, so I just sat until I, got myself together, and I just went home.
And I count you as one of the most important people in my life. And if Errol was here, he would tell you.
Jennifer knows him.
Yeah, Jennifer knows him well. Yeah. Yeah. I told her, tell your daddy keep that guy and he's by out of his house. Get him in the head with your walking stick, You see, Leslie, I learned so much from him. He had a carpenter shop just on his father's land. And he built it himself. And we worked there for ages, years and years and years. That's Errol there.
How you doing?
The funeral director.
Hi, how are you?
Listen, I sent him down for my beef pies.
Oh.
Have a little sniff.
You get it?
Yeah, have a little sniff.
What that?
The beef pies.
I wish I knew you were going down there.
Well, look, I tell you what, that's what this is for. Yeah, these are for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're both for you. That's a lie. I bought them for me. But I decided to say that they're for you, and they're nice and hot, too.
But I keep them here,
Yeah, look, here. Hold them. They're nice and hot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he used to send me to buy these beef pies every day. I mean, oxkin.
Oh, yeah.
I used to make a lot of money off them until the price went up by a threepenny.
You married a girl here, didn't you?
Yeah, Marlene.
From Otterbridge?
No, Marlene Enos.
Amos?
Enos, E-N-O-S, yeah, E-N-O-S. She lived down Bayless Bay.
Oh.
And then I had one little girl while I was here.
Yeah.
And the other one was born after I went away.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't, to be quite, not to put too fine a point on it, I haven't met either of them just yet. It's some considerable difficulty.
Yeah.
And I honestly can say it's not of my making,
Right, right.
But these things take a wee bit of time to resolve. They better hurry up, because when you get 70, 71, you have to try and bury all your devils and put them behind you. So I'm hoping that'll be resolved. And so this is where it began. This is where it happened. Whoever organized it, whatever group, we were all out here. Maybe some people were hiding, I don't know. But I know I wasn't hiding. I was out here on Saturday afternoon. I can remember Bishop Fabler, Holy Fabler, the holy brother. Brother used to do the holy dance every time you saw him. He'd say, "Hey, brother, praise the Lord," and he would do a little dance, holy Fabler. And he came up there, came around the corner. I had all these placards hanging over me, and he came up and he said, hey, Brother Tweed, how you doing? Not too bad. Okay, nice to see you. Okay, you're my nephew? Oh, God almighty. What are you, the 55th? Okay, he came up there, took a 5-pound note out of his pocket, left his wife and children in the car, and came across, and he said, hallelujah. And at that moment in time, I knew that everything was all right. There were larger issues as taking control of Bermuda. That, in my mind at least, that's what a coup d'etat, that's what it was about. Some people we knew were not ready for that. And because we knew that, we played to their sensibilities rather than our own. First time I came to the public notice, because I wouldn't want anyone to think that I am so dishonest and discourteous that I want to hide things from you. I went to prison in this country in 1956, April the 14th, on the allegation that I purportedly stole 150 pounds. Well, let me tell you, I did no such thing. That was the first time I came to the notice. I had no previous convictions, no problems with the police in this country. But they gave me a year in prison, innocently. Innocently. It was a terrible day in my life. And I thought I would never, ever be able to overcome that. So when you go home tonight and you tell your mother and your father that we had Kingsley Tweed down there, and they say, oh yeah, that was the guy that stole 150 pounds, you tell them that I told you it was a lie. And every night when I go home and kneel down by my bed and take my couple of bucks out of my pocket, I count it, and I've been doing it for 45 years. I'm looking for that 150 pounds. I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. Yeah, we worked in this church from I was 5 years old. I started coming Sunday school here, and I cared for Reverend Johnson when the rest of Hurd's Chapel thought that, well, I can't go in that house, but I went in there, and I hope George Hayward is still alive across there. Yeah, George, well, you ask him who bathed Reverend Johnson the morning we took him to the hospital. Because it was George and I who lifted that poor old man up like that, and we cut his toenails and wiped his behind. And George, I don't know, I said, I can do it, because he's my father, you know? Really, an incredible piece of man. He built this building. I made these pews. Ed Simons and I. That's right, he's dead and gone now. And there isn't a plaque in here about it either, you know? And these people need to know their history, man. You know? Wowee. Isn't that something? Where's it? Over there? Hello. Hello. How are you? Hello, mother. How are you? Good. Hello. Hello. I just want to give you these. It's a token of my love and my appreciation for you for all those sweet years.
Thank you. Thank you.
I must love you.
Thank you.
This is one moment I've been waiting for. I said to him when he came to, I hope you've told this dear lady, you know, the first thing I asked him about was Sister Venona Jennings. I understand she's back in Bermuda. And when I get to Bermuda, one of the first people I want to go and visit, Sister Venona.
Do you remember, what's the name? How we went and prayed. You remember this man came into the restaurant?
I've never forgotten it.
And was going to do away with himself.
And you brought him up her
And
chapel?
I brought him up her chapel. And you came in, you know, and we had prayers around the altar.
That day, God was really working. Through you, actually. He came looking for you.
Oh,
In 1989.
yes. That's when the war was on.
That's right, and you were gone, you know?
Yeah.
But it was scary up in Liberia. And I feel so bad that the people haven't really mended their ways since '89. I thought the taste of blood would have been.
I'm sorry you didn't get up in the bush to sing.
Yeah, But you were gone. You were gone by that time in '89.
No, I stayed there in that war.
Well, you stayed in
I
the
stayed
first
right
year.
through that 2 wars, turning back to up there in Bapola, where my station was. It just got on my nerves. Yes. And the shooting was going all around my compound, you know, and the people were running to me like I could save them, and I told them in the same predicament they're in, you know, and they were all around me underneath my table, and I just got a nervous breakdown.
I saw all the churches had bullet holes and the windows were shut out.
They say their mission is nothing but bullet holes.
In the sight of God and in this building, I am determined to go back out there, and if we have to rebuild those rooms with worn-out tools, you know, and put your name up there, I tell you, if God gives me strength and long life, I'm going to be out there just as soon as those rebels, those fools, those people, you know, we used to say in Bermuda who don't have no count of their lives. I'm going back out there. Yeah, I want to see that. That's a promise, I tell you.
And he'll hold you so tightly, 'cause my never fails.
I'm Kingsley, as if you didn't know. And there's only one Kingsley, now henceforth and forever.
Well, I knew that before I returned back to Bermuda that they were going to crucify me because the Bermuda government, the people who ran Bermuda, was not quite finished with me.
And so I'm perhaps guilty of having been spied upon. I hold my hands up. I feel no shame because there was something wrong in Bermuda that I wanted to simply put right. It wasn't about bloodshed of anybody's blood. I'm still not about bloodshed. All I wanted to do was to take some people into the mighty cathedral up there. People in government, people who own the banks, people who own the telephones and the newspapers, and people who monopolize every aspect of business and economic activity in Bermuda. We simply wanted to take them into the cathedral, tie them up tightly, give them bread and water, and every third day, a hot meal. It wasn't about vengeance. It was simply putting some people in their places who got too big for their bloody boots. You know, Errol, you didn't listen to me, brother.
I didn't know that.
No,
yeah.
you didn't listen to me.
All right.
Sorry, but you didn't listen to me.
Yeah.
You just didn't listen. You think you, man. It's my emotions that's on the line here. I know how to deal with that. And I know how to deal with that in relationship to the press. And even Miss Pamplin Gordon. It's just unfortunate. I could even understand her motives for being involved. I'm not as pig-headed and as ignorant and as stupid as some people assume, you know. I've learned one or two things, ABC things, relating to my own kind of lack of social graces, and perhaps in some cases too much or too many of those social graces. Sometimes they can catch you out, and I was determined not to let them catch me out in Bermuda.
Buffoons are soon gonna bring us all to ruin. Time
My 2 daughters have not commented so far, as I know, publicly, but I know that they're my daughters, okay? And they know that I'm their father. And that's what's important. But, you know, we're going to put that right because we're human and... But, you know, I was out in Angola about 8 months ago. I saw some 4 million little black babies out there without fathers and mothers, and they're going to survive. You see the difference? It didn't have to be this way. And all of those ugly newspaper stories, lies, innuendo, just plain unmentionable truths, they penetrate so deep into the human psyche and made my mother and father think that I was some kind of wretch from the lowest hell. No, I've got no more demons. Well, let me correct that. Let me qualify that. There's a little bit of Satan hovering in the background. So that part of me which is human, which is genetic, which I'm born with, it's my nature to be both evil and good at the same time. I only pray to God that I'm more good than I ever was or am or could be evil. That's all I meant by that, you know? That's what I meant by that. This is from my mother, you know? Come to make my peace with God and her. Like, sit, mommy?
I think whenever individuals seek justice and are undaunted by opposition and adversity, that there are always consequences. But I think that ultimately, in the stream of things and in the scheme of the universe, as one prophetic writer said, truth crushed to earth will rise again. And someone else, I think, said, the mills of the gods grind slowly, but exceedingly fine. And then Dr. King used to say, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Some of us actually believe that things bend toward justice, and we're just committed to bending it a little more so that we might get there a little quicker.
2,000 years ago, they killed a man down in North Africa. 2,000 years ago, think about it. You think it's a long time? It was just yesterday, really, in terms of time. It's like a flash of lightning across the landscape of your mind and my mind. He had a simple message, and it was that you should love one another. And for that, they killed him. And it is the simplicity of that message that lends itself to my pursuance of the decent things in life, those things that advance the cause of humankind. His name was Jesus.
I was in my office on the telephones. My coworker, Mrs. Barkley, walked into my office and she was all rattled. She's saying, hang up the phone. I don't even know how I'm going to tell you this. Just hang up the phone. She said, your father just walked in here with 3 other people. And I just pushed my chair back away from my desk because I felt like I was going to fall out.
For me, it was like going backwards to enable myself to move forward. That's what it was about in myself. And so I'm here at 2 instances and 2 directives. One from the Premier and the final directive from God Almighty. A living God who saved me, who keeps me, fills my life with joy. Long suffering and patience. Amen. I'm here for that this morning. I had to go all the way around the world, and then I remembered there was Bermuda. And I'm home now. And I don't feel like leaving. I don't feel like leaving. Maybe you can fix it. But if you don't, I'll be satisfied with my lot. Because God has taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. I remember when Mrs. Jacob's son was in jail up there by St. Monica's Mission, she used to come to Hurd's Chapel every Sunday morning. And she said, I'm going to have to wait for 10 years. And I remember Reverend Johnson saying to her, Sister Lee, why don't you come in from the door? She says, I'm sitting here and I'm waiting for my son to return back home to me. When peace, like a river, she started singing, when peace, like a river, attendeth my way. I'm talking about a mother waiting for a son. When sea, like sea billows roll, whatever it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, like a river attendeth my way. When sorrows like sea billows rolled, when they rolled away from my heart and soul, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, is it just as well? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Someday, if in your hearts you continue to believe,